Okay, welcome back to Steinway Hall. I first discovered Emmet Fox through Chuck Chamberlain. He had a talk called A New Pair of Glasses. It was a recording of a weekend-long workshop. And when he recommended Fox's little booklet, The Golden Key, I went looking for it and absolutely fell in love with Emmet Fox and include his writings in my morning meditations. In the early days of AA, members often went together after meetings to hear Fox speak at Steinway Hall in New York. Even today, some AA groups still share his pamphlets alongside AA literature. Old timers remember how widely Fox's writings were used for guidance. Dr. Bob himself frequently recommended Fox's work along with Henry Drummond's The Greatest Thing in the World. Simple, practical tools the fellowship relied on before AA had its own literature. Fox taught ideas that blended naturally with AA discovering what AA was discovering, that change begins by changing your thoughts. Love and forgiveness are central to spiritual growth. Resentment has to be cleared away. Live one day at a time and stay out of the past. Fox emphasized that thoughts are real things and that you can't have one kind of mind and another kind of life. His focus on love, releasing resentment, and living in the present became woven into AA's earliest spiritual approach, shaping a path that millions in recovery still follow today. And I have Heather from Canada with me here today. Welcome, Heather.
Thanks, Tina. Glad to be here.
And I'm Tina from Idaho. And we are going to discuss part of Fox's booklet, The Seven Main Aspects of God. So I'm going to do a little reading on page 9 that will lead us in to the first main aspect we're going to cover today. We're going to cover God is life, and then we're going to cover God is truth, and then finally today we're going to cover God is love. So God is infinite, but we as human beings, while we cannot, of course, grasp the infinite, can yet acquaint ourselves with many different aspects or attributes of his nature. Of these, there are 7 main aspects that are more important than any of the others. These are 7 fundamental truths about God, and all the others are built up of combinations of some of those 7, or these 7. These truths never change. They were the same a billion years ago, and they will be the same a billion years hence. So naturally, it behooves us to get as clear as understanding and as strong a realization as possible of these 7 main aspects. This can be done by thinking about them a good deal, comparing one with another, and identifying them in the experiences of everyday life. This is prayer, and very powerful prayer too. The quickest way to solve a particular problem is to meditate on whichever aspect is the most appropriate in that particular case. Thinking of any aspect of God will solve the problem. But if you select the right aspect, you will get your result more quickly and more easily. Okay, so I think, Heather, you were going to start with this God is life. And then what we're going to do is we're just going to read a paragraph or two, and then the person reading will offer comments if they have any. and then the other person will offer comments, and we'll go back and forth until we're done commenting on that section, and then we'll move on to the next aspect.
Perfect. All right. So the first main aspect I'm going to consider is life. God is life. God is not just living, nor does God give life, but God is life. Where God is, there life is. God is your life. Life is existence or being. And this one, when I did a little pre-reading, the sentence that really stuck out to me is God is your life. And, I didn't understand that when, before I, worked the steps in a fellowship. I thought my life was my life, and I controlled it, and I did what I wanted to do and tried to get other people to do what I wanted to do. But in the big book of AA, it says God is everything or God is nothing. And I think this kind of mirrors that God is your life and that God is every aspect of your life. And I think a lot of it does come down again to purpose. A lot of us, talk about, what's my purpose for being here? And I think we have a purpose, and that purpose is directed or guided by our higher power or God. And it's to be helpful and useful. And yeah, that's how I think God is life. I'm here to work as a channel for higher power. And I'll pass.
Thanks, Heather. This is Tina in Idaho. I just wanted to add that, God is life. What that brings up for me, again, I think Heather mentioned this, is God is everything or nothing. What's your choice to be? So, all of it, even the things that look bad from my small perspective, and everyone, everything, everywhere, all the time. So I had a tendency before I worked the 12 steps to think that good things were of God and things that I perceived as bad things weren't. And then when I started to do some studying, and this is the big book of Alcoholics Anonymous is really a very mind-blowing text. It what the founders of the 12 steps had in mind was this information that we're studying about Emmet Fox. It's all part of God. And that really confuses us because we like to separate God into heaven and hell, right? There's good and there's bad. And the good is God and the bad isn't God. Well, that makes God kind of tiny when you think about it, right? It's like, and it kind of de-God's God. I mean, God can't be God if God isn't all of it. And then I started having kind of a broadened perspective when I realized that the things that I would have described as bad in my life were the very things that brought me to a bottom. And that arriving at that bottom made me humble and teachable and willing to work the 12 steps. And so those things that were quote unquote bad were not apart from God. I don't think that God interceded in my life and rained bad down upon me. But I do think that God gives us all free will, and that I had a lot of latitude to get myself into trouble with my thinking choices. And when I did that, I wasn't outside of God's care. I was very much inside of God's care, because that path brought me to a bottom, which brought me to this kind of remarkable program of recovery, this remarkable 12-step program that has completely um, saved my life. I was kind of at the point where I didn't want to live anymore, saved my life, and has helped me to start living a life of happy usefulness. There, it's described in the 12 and 12 as we are intelligent agents of God's ever expanding creation. That was the role that was meant for me. That's the role that's meant for everybody. And but sometimes we need a little bit of, we need to kick our own asses to get to the point where we are willing to see that and willing to you know, follow the instructions in the 12 steps and get reliably connected to our real source. Okay, do you have anything else you want to comment on that section, or should I read on?
Go ahead.
Okay. Okay, so the next section is when you are sick, you are only partly alive. When you are tired or depressed or discouraged, you are only partly alive. To be truly alive means to be well and young and full of interest in the day's work. Few people as yet express God in an adequate way because they lack the sense of life. What usually happens is that people grow up to a maximum sense of life, what we call the prime of life, and then gradually deterioration sets in, a process which we call middle age. And finally, come old age and death. This process is common to the whole race and is not, of course, the fault of the individual, but we have to overcome it sometime by realizing that it is only a false belief. And by knowing, not merely believing, that God is our life and that He never changes. Do you have any comments you want to make on that section, Heather?
Yeah, sure. Thanks, Tina. Um, yeah, I think what stands out for me in this paragraph is the idea is that we all have this conception of what our life is supposed to be like. So we're young, we do certain things. We're a teenager, we do certain things. You know, we hit our 20s, we're supposed to get married and have children and work a job and then retire. And our life, you know, is set up that way. And for a lot of us, we can kind of hit those cultural milestones and say, like, this isn't doing it for me. You know, like, what is this what it's all about? Is this what my life is supposed to be? And I think what Fox is telling us here, he says to be truly alive means to be well and young and full of interest in the day's work. Um, I mean, be well, so take care of ourselves, you know, eat right, exercise, get a good night's sleep, all of those things. A young, I think, young at heart is kind of what he's referring to here because of what he puts later, and full of interest in the day's work. And, you know, when I was not in the program, my day began every day with a sense of dread and fear and anxiousness. And that feeling would hit before I even got out of bed, because I knew that I had all of these things I was supposed to be doing. They weren't fulfilling me. Um, I was doing them because I should or I had to. And what he's telling us here is that at some point we're going to get to the point in our life where, you know, we overcome and realize that that isn't our purpose. We aren't going to become fulfilled through all of these cultural milestones we think we need to hit. And that knowing that God is our life and that He never changes is what gives us the purpose, and it gives us the wellness, the youthfulness, and the inspiration to be interested in the day's work. That's how we kind of fulfill on our purpose here on earth. And I'll pass.
Thanks, Heather. This is Tina. I really wanted to comment on this. When you are sick, you are only partially alive. When you are tired or depressed or discouraged, you are only partially alive. And that is exactly what I was when I hit my bottom before I worked the 12 steps. I was physically sick, um, and depressed and discouraged. I'll also add that I was anxious. I had a lot of anxiety. And the anxiety was, I think, caused by um, playing God, thinking that I was supposed to be my solution. I was supposed to use my brain, figure things out, solve everybody's problems around me and my own problems. And so I had started reading every book I could get my hands on, every self help book. I did a lot of therapy and EMDR. I even did reevaluation counseling, but it all just kept feeding into this cycle of me analyzing and dissecting and thinking harder. And it turned, there's a line in the big book of Alcoholics Anonymous that says that their drinking was at first something like this. I'm paraphrasing their solution, but it turned like a boomerang in flight and came back and all but cut them to ribbons. And that's kind of like my thinking. It at first it felt like I am going to figure this out. I'm going to win. I'm going to be victorious. But at some point, all of that analyzing and dissecting turned like a boomerang in flight, and all but came back and cut me to ribbons. And there's a line in the big book that was so hopeful when I read it the first time. It says, "Our thinking is the crux of our problem." And I was like, that's true of me. That is a true statement in my life, that my thinking has in fact become my problem. And so to think that there's something better for us, to see what it says here, that when we're tired or depressed or discouraged, we're only partly alive. To be truly alive means to be well and young and full of interest in the day's work. And by work, though, I think it can mean our work that we do to make money. I think that's important, and we can pursue our work in kind of a different way, where we're pursuing it with this idea of, what can I contribute to life? What can I contribute to the world through my work? But I also have really found that working the 12 steps and carrying the message to others, being a sponsor, has given me this guide of how to do that work in an entirely different way, how I can be about work in this way of having it be joyful and interesting and flowing through me into the world, instead of me trying to wrestle the world into my image, into what I think it ought to be. And that's kind of what I was doing before I hit my bottom. I had these notions of what a successful life was supposed to look like. And I, of course, wanted to be a success. And I was trying to wrestle life into, that image that I had, instead of realizing that I could seek guidance from my source to be a channel and have that inspiration flow through me. And it didn't happen all at once, and I had to keep checking in and asking for guidance. But I eventually got connected to this source of guidance. And this podcast itself is an example of when I actually ask higher power, God, the universe, my source, what's next? What would you like me to do next? I get inspiration. And then I start to feel this joyful connection to life. And that includes everything. And with that, I will pass.
Do you want me to read? I'll go ahead and read then the next paragraph.
Great.
Joy is one of the highest expressions of God as life. Actually, it is a mixture of life and love, and the Bible says that the sons of God shout for joy. This means that we must realize our divine sonship, we must experience joy, and that sorrow is a loss of the sense of the fatherhood of God. Joy and happiness always have an expansive effect, just as fear has a contracting and paralyzing effect. You know how a little child, when it meets someone whom it loves and trusts, expands like an opening flower and goes out to meet him. But when it is afraid, it shrinks back into itself. That is what happens to the human soul, too. Again, when a person says, I can, you always notice an expansive and forward movement. But when he says, I can't, there is a retraction. You cannot imagine a person saying, yes, I can, with a shrinking gesture, or no, I can't, in an optimistic or forthright way. The body always expresses the thought, and the thought of life heals and inspires, whereas thoughts of fear and death contract and destroy. Would you like to comment on that, Tina?
Sure. So, this statement, this means that when we realize our divine sonship, we must experience joy, and that sorrow is a loss of the sense of the Father of God. So, sorrow is again a part of all of this. It's a guide rail, right? If I am in sorrow, if I'm in suffering, I can begin to claim the truth that that isn't God's will for my life, that somehow I've gotten off the track, and that all is needed is a course correction. So I just keep loving this phrase, God is everything or nothing. What's your choice to be? So what that does for me is it reminds me that when I'm experiencing things like sorrow, it's still from God, because its intention is to help me to see what's going on. And this idea too that fear has a contracting and paralyzing effect. So I was spending a lot of time in fear, in part because I was spending a lot of time out of now. I was either in the future making up stories, or I was in the past kind of reliving things, or I was in dishonesty, making up that I knew what other people were thinking. Like that even mattered what other people are thinking. What I've learned since is that it doesn't matter what other people are thinking. It makes absolutely zero difference what other people are thinking. So my life had become so complex and so wrought with anxiety because I was doing all of these impossible things. I was living in the past, I was living in the future, and I was living in other people's heads. And those are all impossible things for a human being, you know? And so it's going to make me feel incredibly anxious, and it's going to make me feel incredible sorrow, and it's going to make me, because there's no possibility of any kind of success living like that. There's nothing that's going to go well when I do that. I'm just going to be doing this self-fulfilling prophecy, stay in my obsession, stay in my stinking thinking, stay in my crazy thoughts, And it started to just build and build and build and build until that was kind of the landscape of my whole life. This kind of insane living in yesterday, living in tomorrow, and living in stories that I was making up in my head. And it all got very sad. But when I hit my bottom around that, and see, there's God right there hitting the bottom, that's God, and then asked for help from someone who was offering help, a woman who had said she, like me, was codependent, she was love addict, she was Al-Anon, and she had hit a bottom, didn't want to live anymore either, and now had a life she loved, and was offering to take me through the steps. I was like, I'm going to accept that offer because I am out of ideas. And then I got to start to work the steps, and it all led me down this path where I learned that all of it is worthwhile, even the things that look bad from my small perspective. So I can extend that to everyone that I love. So if there are people that I love that are in sorrow, they're in hardship, they're having times that they don't like. And of course, now I know that all of those things in my life were self inflicted when I look back. Um, I can now have hope for others that I love, and I can pray for others, and I can remind myself, and I do every night in my prayers as I envision them surrounded by higher powers, love and light, that there's a perfect plan for everyone, just like I learned that there was a perfect plan for me, which had to take this detour through sorrow, through fear. But it was useful because it brought me to a place of being humble and teachable and willing to follow instructions. And I pass.
All right. So I'm just going to add a little bit to what you said. Um, so that first sentence, joy is one of the highest expressions of God as life. Um, I think it's interesting to take the time to think about, okay, what is my conception of joy? Because I think a lot of times we can be culturally taught about what joy is. And for me, joy was always being happy. Everything was perfect. Life was grand. But that's not really what I experience now in recovery. The big book promises us that if we do the steps and do the work and stay connected to our higher power, we're going to have a spiritual awakening. And I think joy in the context of recovery looks a little different than maybe what we see out in social media and wherever. So for me, joy is living in now. Joy is appreciating what's happening in this moment. So, joy to me can be the awe of a beautiful sunrise. Joy can be watching my grandkids play. Joy can be, a really good meal that I've taken the time to prepare or someone's prepared for me. So I find joy to be contentment and peace and appreciating the moment. And as it, was mentioned, as Tina mentioned about the fear and I can and can't being kind of the blockade to joy is what I see. So like Tina, I spent a lot of time in fear and anxiety. I did a lot of I can't because I was afraid I would fail. I was afraid people would judge me, that I couldn't do it perfectly. And there is no joy in that. There is constriction, there is almost bondage to that. And all of it is thinking about the future, thinking about the past, worrying about what people are going to think. And yeah, I can't control what people think. And so, what I learn and what I gain through working the steps with that I can attitude is self confidence. And I think, that self confidence is part of the expanding part. It's part of the freedom to try something. And even if I fail, that's okay. It's part of the joy. It's part of trying new things without fear. And so I think that's kind of the joy for me that I found in the program is I've gone from the bondage of I can't to the freedom of I can. And I'll pass.
So is it my turn to read?
Yes.
Okay. And did you leave off with death, contract, and destroy?
Yes.
Okay. So I'll read the next two paragraphs. You should realize the aspect of God as life for healing sickness, for the getting older belief, and for any kind of depression or discouragement. Realizing divine love heals a sick person. And of course, you can heal animals and plants too. Animals usually respond quickly to this treatment, and plants very quickly indeed. But one should not try to keep an old animal alive by treatment after it has reached the normal span for its species. Animals and plants yield quickly because they do not have that strong sense of personal egotism that most human beings do. They never make up their minds that they cannot get well or that sickness is sent for a good purpose. Neither do they give way to discouragement because they have not been healed faster. And I'll just offer some comments on that. So I do have a chronic illness, and this was really helpful for me to read. Um, Realizing divine life heals a sick person. So my mantra after reading things like this, and I also read some Louise Hay stuff every once in a while. Um, my mantra is I am getting better every day in every way. And prior to looking into this stuff, I was focused on getting worse. Every day it was like somehow if I paid attention to every little detail, was I getting worse in this way? Was I getting worse in that way? Somehow I was going to have power over it. What in fact happened is that I was, what we think about, we become is one of the things that Fox talks about. So my thoughts need to be about thinking about being, um, you know, completely well, that I am well on my way to getting better. And I am. After getting acquainted with Emmet Fox, I actually searched the internet for one more time. I was on the brink of with my partner considering going to Oregon to have my life ended. And I did one more search on the internet and I found a woman in Canada who listed my precise symptoms. And then I found a path um, for getting better for my particular health situation. Um, it's not, it's interesting because it's very much like the 12 steps. We get recovered, we're not cured. It's the same thing. It's like I'm going to have this health condition for the rest of my life, but this path that I found is reversing the condition. And it's kind of like my spiritual sickness. The path of the 12 steps that I found are reversing my spiritual condition and bringing me closer and closer to this truth that God is life. And, so my mantra again is that I am every day in every way, I'm better and better and better. And it works for me spiritually and it also works for me physically. And I like the part about talking about animals and plants because I'm a gardener. And I know that when I garden, it's just automatic for me to garden with love. I attend to my garden with love, um, and it responds like crazy, you know. And I need to attend to every other aspect of my life the way that I intend to my garden with this idea of kind of this creative cultivating things that work and things that don't work. I mean, there's often things that don't work in my garden, and my garden's teaching me all the time, you know? It's like, oh, well, that didn't work. Let's try that. And so I just continue to learn, and I'll pass.
Thanks, Tina. Yeah, I want to comment about this sentence that um, when talking about the plants and animals, they never make up their minds that they cannot get well or that sickness is sent for a good purpose. Um, they neither do they give way to discouragement because they have not healed faster. And, to me, this speaks all about control, which as a codependent, I, like to have control over things when I'm in my disease. And, we're trying to, make ourselves better and so on. And I think what Fox is talking about here is having the faith and trusting in God as life, to heal those things, and that there are infinite possibilities and there are infinite opportunities that we have no clue about, that are available to higher power, to God. And so I just have to let it go with faith and trust that it's, again, if God is life, this is all part of higher power's plan. And I may not understand it, I may not realize it, but I can have faith and trust that this is his plan for me. And I'll pass. If you have, do you have any other comments, Tina?
I do not.
Okay, I'll read the next paragraph. An excellent experiment is to select two plants or two flower beds and start them off together. Then treat one of them every day, but not the other. And before long, you will be surprised to find how much difference there is in the progress made by them. Realize the presence of divine life in the flower bed or plant and give it thoughts of love. Drench it with love. Everyone knows that some gardeners are far more successful than others, even though their technical qualifications may be the same. And the reason is that one loves his plants and the other has only a business interest in them. So I'm Heather. I'll just do a brief comment. So, I think this experiment, you could probably find it a million places on the internet where they have done this. And I think what Fox is telling us is that, when we um, love ourselves, um, that we will bloom and progress and thrive. That's part of the divine life. That's what higher power wants for us. The big book says higher power's goal is for us to be happy, joyous, and free. And I think that we have to, begin with ourselves in that respect. We, love others, obviously, but we also love ourselves in order for us to thrive and be happy and joyful in this life. And I'll pass. Tina, if you would like to.
Thanks, Heather. Couple things come up for me. One of the things is if I think about having a pipe and that there is corrosive poison flowing through the pipe, it's going to eventually corrode and break down the pipe. And when I think about myself as this channel, what flows through me is going to have an impact on me, my health, my body, my mind, my being. And so I've started to, when I read this the first time years ago, I started doing a practice where when I would drive to get to our home from downtown, you go through the section of town where the food kitchens are. So there are a lot of homeless individuals wandering around, walking around. And I always used to feel guilt when I drove through that area because I thought, I need to be doing more here. I need to be helping more. And then when I read this, I realized that I can, in fact, do something right now. I can envision these people surrounded by love and surrounded by light. And I don't know if we're going to get to this or not in this section. Let's see. I don't want to, anyway, I might be saying something that's coming up, but I just started practicing that, just actually envisioning these people infused with and surrounded by God's love, and that I could contribute to life in that way, too, just caring about people, loving people. This guilt, this sense of I need to fix it is actually playing God. This, this opportunity to bring love to every situation is a way to be a channel of God's love. So guilt is not a helpful tool. Love is a helpful tool. So that's what I've decided to do, and that's what's come to my mind when I read this, is that I try to drench people with love in my mind's eye and in my heart. And I actually can see auras, which when I tell people, they often look at me with a raised eyebrow. And I didn't really ever want to see auras, but I started noticing it in 12-step face-to-face meetings, that I see a band of light around people. And so I thought, well, maybe that is something that I can actually learn to harness. I can actually participate in that. So I try to envision these people surrounded by love, surrounded by light, and I hope it's helpful. And I pass. Is it my turn to read, or did you want to offer more comments?
Your turn.
All right. If a person seems to lack ambition, treat him for life. Of course, by realizing the presence of divine life in him. A man came to me whose grown-up son seemed to be quite without ambition. On my advice, the father treated him by realizing divine love, and very soon things began to change. The patient lost his listlessness, began to take an interest in life, and was soon doing well at his work. The doctors told the father that the patient's glands were working better. And no doubt the treatment did improve, them, but of course, this was only the channel or means by which the prayer acted. And I will pass.
Right. Thanks, Tina. Yeah, I think this is, very interesting because for many of us that are in recovery, I think sometimes we forget that, everybody has their own higher power and they, have that ability to connect with it or not. But we can also use our connection with higher power, like it says, being a channel of, divine life, that we can, through our prayers, is what they're talking about. Um, Through our prayers, is that we can help others. And, many of us might think that our prayers are not powerful, or that our prayers are for others are maybe asking a lot of higher power. But it says here is to realize divine life, and very soon things began to change. So, this, I think, is a perspective shift as well. So, the perspective being, the man thought his son was without ambition. But when Fox said, okay, instead of thinking he's without ambition, can you look at him and realize his divine life, his divine purpose, his, purpose for being here? And maybe part of it was the shift in perspective for even the father, or the man, yeah, the father, um, and the power of his prayer and his divine love, you know, um, towards his son. So we have to look at, the power by which God can use us and others as a channel. And I'll pass.
Thanks, Heather. So, yeah, it's to me, it's just super practical. It's like if I look at something and I think, well, that's going badly, that can't be good. That's going to be, I see a really bad outcome down the road around that. I mean, is that helpful? I mean, is that a helpful perspective? Or could I look at it from the perspective of this person is adored by God, just like everyone, and God has a perfect plan and purpose for this person's life. And there's no way to get off God's path. There just isn't a way. And that God has something wonderful in store. And so, do I want to be part of that solution, or do I want to be part of the problem? If I'm going to be a tool, I want to be a tool for good for the people that I claim to love and care about. And even for the people that I'm kind of miffed at. And that's a good thing for me to remember right now, is that I can envision people that I might be, judging because I don't necessarily like the way they're thinking or acting. I can also surround those people. I don't want to think ill of anyone, because if I'm thinking ill is flowing through me. That's not a good idea. It's not a good idea to have those pipes being corroded by negativity. I need to take good care of what's flowing through me into the world in every situation, even the situations where I feel justified to be in judgment or blame or whatever. So I want to make sure that all of my moments are spent, as many as possible. I'm not perfect, but as many moments as possible. And by the way, when I think icky shit, it doesn't take long for me to start feeling icky. I mean, it's just cause and effect. So I need to, and that's really actually wonderful. That there's a line in the 12 steps and 12 traditions that I always mess up, but it's something like great suffering and great joy are disciplinarians. We need no others. So if I participate in bad, icky stuff, it's going to hurt. Maybe not immediately, but eventually. And um, and it's a loving disciplinarian It's a loving discipline. It's like we have a higher power that loves us so much, like a very good parent. You know, if we're good parents, we don't throw ourselves in front of our children making bad decisions, right? We allow our children, because we love them, to learn from their bad decisions, to feel the pain that comes with making bad decisions, because that becomes our discipline. That we learn from the inside that way, right? We don't have a God who's a top down authoritarian God that comes in with a whip and says, get back to my way. We have this own internal guide that's going to let us know when we're off course. So, this treating people, like when the son is lost interest and listlessness, I'm not going to berate him. I am going to love him. I am going to trust that he's got his own inner guidance, and that it's trying that I love this idea that God has, it's an A-B conversation, see my way out of it. You know, God's having a conversation with everyone, and their life and their experiences are teaching them, just like my life, and like God's used my life and my experiences to teach me, lovingly teach me. And my experiences, when I hurt myself, I learn. I go, oh, that wasn't helpful. I'm going to correct my course here. And I pass.
All right. We will do the last paragraph on life. Here is another interesting experiment which you can make. Some evening, when you find yourself in a crowded streetcar or subway train, and most of the people around you are looking tired and worried and obviously wishing that they were at their journey's end, just start declaring the presence of God as life in all those present and keep it up. You will be surprised and gratified at what will happen. First, one person will brighten up and smile, and then another will obviously relax. And before long, the whole crowd in that car will be feeling and looking differently. But do not say that this is fantastic nonsense, but try it. Yeah, so for me, this is kind of the ripple effect, right? Where I can bring about through God, again, working as a channel of higher power or God, where I can be helpful, useful, loving, and kind to those around me. And, you know, I think working the steps really teaches us how our life can change when we change our perspective. And, it's funny because when I work the steps, like for example, my relationship with my brother, who I resented a lot before working the steps, dramatically changed. And it was just because my perspective changed. And, he didn't know anything about it. He did nothing different. It was me. And so, yeah, this is what I like to call the ripple effect. And I think as we work the steps and live the program, that ripple effect starts within ourselves and goes to, you know, our fellowship, if we're in a fellowship, our partner, our children, our grandchildren, our community. And, that's the ripple effect. And it's all through the presence of God as life. That's what makes it happen. And I'll pass. Tina, do you want to comment?
Yeah, just a quick comment. I kind of mentioned how I've tried that experiment, and I think it's just an amazing experiment, and I would really encourage people to try it. One good place that I've tried it is a very busy supermarket when everybody's standing in a very long line and in a hurry, and just envisioning these people and bringing the God is life to the situation, and envisioning people surrounded by love and light. And I have seen um, this make a difference, and it's really a fun experiment. So I encourage people to give it a try. Do you have any other comments, or should I read on? Okay. The second main aspect of God is truth. God is truth. God is not truthful, but truth itself. And wherever there is truth, there is God. God is absolute truth and does not change. There are many things which are relatively true at certain times and places only, but God is absolute truth at all times and in all circumstances. As soon as we touch God, who is the absolute, relative things disappear. To know the truth about any condition heals it. Jesus said, know the truth, and the truth shall make you free. Truth is the great healer. Do you have any thoughts about that?
Not at the moment. Do you want to go ahead? You got any?
Sure. So, what comes up for me is what I've already mentioned about, just this idea that God is everything or nothing. What's my choice to be? And that means even things that look bad from my small perspective. So I used to be very discouraged and batted about by conditions like, oh, that looks horrible. Oh, that looks horrible. Oh, that looks good. No, that now looks horrible. Oh, that looks good. Oh, now it's horrible. Just kind of this being batted around by appearances instead of this kind of underlying law that God is truth. The truth is that there is no one who is outside of God's love, and that all things are working for good in everyone's lives. At any point, people can, make a decision to align themselves with love, to align themselves with God, to align themselves with, being helpful and useful. It's always available, and it's always available to everyone. And I pass.
Yeah, I think what came up for me is the idea that, the truth is not my truth. I think a lot of times we can get those things mixed up, or where I think my truth is God's truth. And I have to realize that, again, God is there, God is in everyone, including me and including everyone else that I deal with. And so, what I think is my truth may not be and probably is not God's truth. And so, what I have to do in these times is to understand and realize that higher power does have the truth, knows the truth. I may not know it. It may be revealed to me at some point in the future in God's time or in the moment. But, God is the truth. And truth is the great healer, according to, if John, that the truth will set you free. The idea, that once we know the truth, and I think what they're talking about here is the truth of God, right? That God is life, that God is truth, and that it's not I'm not going to understand it. Again, I just have faith and trust that, God is handling it and that the truth may at times or in circumstances be revealed or not. But I have no power over that, and I'll pass.
Okay, I don't have any more comments on that section. Do you want to read the next section?
You bet. You should realize God as truth when you want information on any subject, or if you suspect that you have to deal with deceit or falsehood. If you have reason to believe that someone is trying to deceive you, think of God as truth and claim that divine truth dwells in the person concerned and is expressed through him. If you realize this clearly enough, then he will speak the truth. When you have to transact any important business, such as signing a lease or a contract, spend a few minutes realizing divine truth. And if there is anything that you should know, it will come out. Of course, people may have no desire to deceive you, and yet for some reason, you may not be given the whole story. I know of several cases where serious misunderstandings were prevented because somebody realized God as truth, and so all the facts were brought out. I know also know I know also of several cases where intentional dishonesty was frustrated in the same way. And I'll pause there. So yeah, I think, this is like it told us at the beginning that we can call upon one aspect of God to solve the problem. And if you select the right one, you will get the result more quickly. So, yeah, so this is where we can, call on God as truth to bring out what needs to be known, not just for us, but for the good of all parties. So, not just for us individually, but for everyone involved. And I think that's another thing that we have to think about is God is life is true for everyone, just not just me. And God is truth is for everyone, not just me. And I'll pass. Tina, do you want to comment?
Yeah, I'm going to read that last little paragraph and comment on the whole section. Realizing God is truth will save you hours of work and research in any field. You will be led to the right book or the right place or the right person without loss of time, or the necessary information will come to you in some way or other way. So, this whole section really helped me in my work life. I used to and still can stress out about, you know, new clients, and um, I was always thinking that I was getting in over my head, that I often felt like the imposter syndrome. I don't know what I'm doing here. And the reality is that I don't have to know everything about everything. I've got this God is truth going on in the background all of the time, and that I can tap in to the truth that I need, and I can claim this truth, and I can learn these truths, and I can transact important business, you know, information. Um, and trust that if I don't know things immediately, I can ask for guidance and then wait until I'm guided. And that sometimes might mean that I need to do a little bit more research, or there have been times where I've had to let people know, potential new clients, you know what? I am not qualified in this area. This is really beyond me, but I can recommend someone to you that I think could be helpful to you around this. Um, so that's truth too, is to know when I'm out of my depth and I need to refer somebody to somebody else. But I can't tell you how many times, I have been helped by someone else that I've reached out to. So it says you will be led to the right book or the right place or the right person without loss of time, or the necessary information will come to you in some way. And that keeps happening over and over and over again. Not immediately. And I have to be willing to ask what I don't know and trust that I'm going to be guided. And just had it happen again this very morning. There was a situation that I needed some help with, and I have a person that works with me, and we got it done. And so part of the truth sometimes is I don't really know. I got to ask somebody who might. And so I also feel this encouraging me around, things on a national scale or even a worldwide scale where it looks like things are careening out of control or going in a icky direction. And it's like, okay, I can trust and believe that God is truth, and um that those who, and I can even, envision leaders being innervated with this light of truth, this divine truth, and that they are going to be guided. I can believe that truth. I can claim that truth. I can go back to the previous one, and I can envision them surrounded by love and light, and know that they will be guided, and that, like it says here, um, um, sometimes truth needs to come to light that might change things, might startle us awake. That's all also important information. So again, going back to the original point of this whole thing is that God is everything or nothing, and that there's this underlying thing I can trust, that all is well. And I pass.
All right, so we will go on to the third main aspect of God is love. God is love. God is not loving, but love itself. And it would probably be true to say that of all the seven main aspects, this is the most important one for us for us in practice. There is no condition that enough love will not heal. And where there is goodwill, it is not difficult to develop a sufficient sense of love for the purpose of healing. The whole Bible deals with the nature of God, and as the scripture develops, the idea of God becomes clearer and clearer until toward the end it says, God is love, and he that dwelleth in love dwelleth in God, and God in him. And higher than this we cannot go. Jesus himself said, by this shall all men know that ye are my disciples, if ye have love one to another. And my comments on this are, this statement, God is love, that's what brought me to my 12-step fellowship. The idea that God is love, because I did not grow up with that experience or that concept of God. To me, God was a authoritarian person who I had to please and who judged me and gave me punishments when I did not behave well. It was very much the good and the bad in opposition, and it was up to me to attempt to always be good. So the idea that, God is love, and that God's love dwells within me and I dwell within his love, so that God loves me is kind, compassionate, patient, tolerant. All of those characteristics that I associate with love were something new for me when I went through the steps and when I created, my concept of what higher power means to me. Those are the um, attributes that I assign to my higher power. And so to be living in love, um, being having God use me as a channel of love is a whole different way of thinking. And when I do that, love becomes not a feeling, but an action. So, how do being helpful and useful is showing acts of love and being loving to others. And so how does that happen? What does that look like? Not just what does it feel like, but what does it look like when I put that into action? And that being my primary purpose of being helpful and useful. And I'll pass, Tina.
Thanks, Heather. This statement, I just wanted to make a comment on. God is love, and he that dwelleth in love dwelleth in God, and God in him. And higher than this, we cannot go. So I have experience in loving. My first stark experience was when I met my son. He was born. They laid him on top of me. I looked at him and I encountered a kind of love that I had never experienced before that moment. And it just stayed with all my three children. Um, I know what love is, and it isn't a wimpy thing. It isn't all flowers and roses, you know. It is sometimes love looks like letting people that I love hurt themselves with their choices. You know, it is it is wanting the absolute best for them and trusting that they have their own source and that is trying to have a conversation with them. And the most loving thing I can do is to stay out of the middle of that conversation. So love, real love is um, tough, not in the sense that it bats people around or beats people up. I mean, it, um, it, it, it sees, um, when things look good, you can experience love, but real love, you can even experience when things look bad. When things don't look the way I want them to look, when someone is making a choice that I'm afraid for them around. So love has muscles. Love has very big biceps. It does the heavy lifting. It doesn't cave in when it looks like somebody that you care about is making a choice that looks like it's going to hurt them. It stays. It's like, oh, um, this person is, you know, not mine. They don't belong to me. They belong to something bigger and more powerful than me. And that loves them more than I can even imagine. So, things like, having to watch my daughter almost die of drug and alcohol addiction, that was um, hard, but I knew because I've been in the 12-step recovery program that misery is the great persuader. The way it says it in the big book is alcohol is the great persuader, or drinking. I can't remember which, but but my word I use is misery. So when someone that I love is accumulating misery, I have to remember that that is not happening outside of God's field of vision, right? I don't have to panic. Um, higher power is the higher power of everyone. I love it that God's everywhere at all times. This is not happening outside of God's um, field of vision. And I can remember very clearly, I knew that alcohol and drugs absolutely kill people. I absolutely know that. We know that, right? But even still, um, what I believe is that it doesn't end here. Do I know what happens when we die? I do not. But I do know that it does not. And I do believe that it does not end here. So when my daughter was getting worse and worse and worse, and it took more than a decade, um, I knew that alcohol and drug use can in fact kill people. But I also know that codependency can kill people. And I knew that her only chance was for me to stay out of the way of her bottom and get to a point where she herself wanted a different way of life. And that looked like her in a hospital bed with tubes running out and in her, and having all kinds of horrible, I don't know what they're called. She was having hallucinations, and uh, as she was detoxing from these substances, and in a lot of suffering. And and I knew that it could, in fact, and looked like it was going to kill her. But I knew that if I interceded, if I tried to rescue, if I tried to save, I don't have the power to save, by the way. I mean, it's just ridiculous. I don't have the power to save, so I knew that her only chance was within her. And she did end up going to treatment, and now she hikes Machu Picchu and travels to Bali and has this huge, wonderful life. So, so that was just a real huge uh, learning experience for me. How deep does my love go? Right? Love is this huge thing, and um, and combining that with the truth one that we just did, talked about on the prior page. God is absolute truth. The truth is I cannot save people. That is an absolute truth. One life per person. That is an absolute truth. And this idea of love, God loves her more than I could ever love her. And God is awake, and God has a plan. I mean, I did, in fact, take her to the hospital when she wanted to go to the hospital. But, um, you know, it was her indwelling love, her indwelling God that um, has her where she is today, alive and well and thriving. That's a inside job, and I can't do it for anybody else. And I pass.
I think it's your turn to read. I have no other comment.
Think we're at where there is fear. Oh, is that right?
Yeah, that's where we left off.
Okay. Where there is fear, there cannot be love. The best way to rid yourself of fear is to realize divine love. When you love God more than you love your problem, you will be healed. Does that seem strange to you? It is true. If you love God more than you love your microbe, your sickness, your grievance, your lack, or your fear, you will be healed. If you could feel a sense of divine impersonal love toward everyone, no one could hurt you. If someone came to rob you or kill you, he would not be able to carry out his intention. We have all heard many stories of exceptional people who were able to go among wild beasts in the jungle without being hurt. And there are many other histories on record of people who passed through extraordinary dangers of other kinds quite unscathed. I don't have any thoughts about that right now. Do you have any comments, Heather?
Yeah, I do some. So yeah, where there is fear, there cannot be love. Um, as someone who's spent pretty much 24/7 either in a state of fear or anxiety, which again is fear, um, I can believe that because I'm not in the moment. I'm not in now. I'm not in the great reality. And so if I turn to love instead of fear, um, then it says I can be healed. When you love God more than you love your problem, you will be healed. Um, yeah, and for some of the people, codependents, which I am, that can be hard because that means, I love being in control more than I want to be healed. But I know that my control issues, my people pleasing, all of those codependent behaviors I had were the problem. I thought they were the solution, but I realize now, working the steps, that that was the problem. And so I have to let go of my attachment to my problems, to, embrace the healing that I can get from my higher power, to embrace the love of my higher power. I have to let go of all of that comfort and safety, perceived comfort and safety that those behaviors gave me. So fear being that I'm not going to get something or I'm going to lose something is one of those behaviors. And when I let go of those behaviors, like we do in steps 6 and 7, then I am ready and prepared to, embrace divine love because I've cleared that path. I have realized what the problem is in my particular case, and that I now that no longer is the solution. The solution now is higher power, and part of that is higher power love. Higher power is love. And I'll stop there and go ahead.
I think I'm going to read the next section and then comment on that section and the one before because it kind of flows for me, if that's okay. Divine love never fails, but the important thing to realize is that divine love must be in your own heart and cannot operate from outside, so to speak. If you had sufficient divine love for everyone in your heart, you could heal others by speaking the word once. And in many cases, your mere presence would bring about healing without your having made any special effort at all. Of course, by the time you reached this stage, you would have gotten rid of all criticism and condemnation. You would never for an instant want to see someone punished or think it serves him right. This does not mean you would condone wrongdoing in any way, but you would condemn the wrong and not the wrongdoer. If a small baby is troublesome or perhaps breaks a valuable object, you regret the act, but you do not hate the baby. I just love that. So, in dealing with criminals and other delinquents, we should take whatever steps are wise concerning them, such as locking them up in humane prisons for their own good as well as that of society, but without hatred. Our burglar must be restrained, for instance, not only to prevent his victims from being robbed, but for his own sake to prevent his criminal career developing and perhaps ultimately culminating in murder. Of course, his prison term should be reformatory and not punitive. Tina, and my comments on this are I really love this section because um, it helps me to see that, um, especially this does not mean you would condone. So it says that, for instance, you would never for an instant want to see someone punished or think it serves him right. This does not mean you would condone wrongdoing in any way, but you would condemn the wrong and not the wrongdoer. If a small baby is troublesome or perhaps breaks a valuable object, you regret the act, but you do not hate the baby. So I love that when we see people misbehaving or um, being hurtful, we remember that um, that they're not, we don't have to condone bad behavior. We don't have to condone wrong behavior, but we don't hate the baby. And I love that he says hate the baby because baby is immature, right? And so we can look at this as anybody who is acting out of a childlike immaturity. We don't let them hurt others, but we don't hate them. We know that they've just lost their way. We've lost our way before. We probably might lose our way later today, but so we know what it's like to lose our way. Hopefully it's not all the way of stealing and doing things like that, but we know what it means to lose our way. So we don't allow people to continue harming others, but we don't hate them or condemn them because we all have lost our way. We've all gotten off the path of love, and we can all be restored to the path of love. Um, but we don't allow people to go on hurting um, people or, breaking laws, etc. Um, and I'll pass.
Thanks, Tina. Yeah, this idea that divine love never fails. And, I think it shows for us is, we're talking about a love of humanity, a love of other people who are not like us, who are very different, but seeing each person, as a representation of higher power, and that higher power has love for all, and that, that we can extend that love to others. As was said, we don't have to condone bad behavior, but instead of judging and criticizing and condemning people for their actions, we can act with compassion and tolerance and patience towards those people as being another human being who is obviously suffering and in pain, just like we were before we came to program, and to give them those things that higher power would give them: the compassion, the tolerance, and the patience as a fellow human. And I will pass. Do you want me to read the next one?
Yes, please.
All right. In like manner, you must not permit other people to cheat you or otherwise impose upon you. That would be to help them to be dishonest or selfish. Protect your own rights, but always in the spirit of divine love. And I'm going to read the story if that's okay. You probably know the old story of a stranger who settled in a town and asked his neighbor, "What are the people round here like?" The neighbor, a Quaker, replied quietly with a question: "What were the people like where thee came from?" The newcomer answered, "I have come from blank. The people there were very mean and dishonest." The Quaker answered, "I'm afraid thee will find them all here." A third person who had overheard the conversation joined in by remarking, "This surprises me, because I have come from the same town, and I found them a very kind and friendly lot of people." And the old Quaker, turning to him, said, "Thee will find them all here too." And I'll stop there. So this is a great story um, that kind of illustrates, perceptions that we have. If we perceive people in a certain way, we are going to find those characteristics in those people. That's what we're going to be looking for. And we're going to find it. And if we perceive people in a loving and kind way, we're going to find them too. So, in step work, we learn about, we we are what we think we are, and we get what we think we are. And so if we think that, people are mean and dishonest, then that's going to be our reality. So a lot of this, comes back to the idea of whatever your perception is, that's the evidence that you're going to find in your reality. And I'm going to stop there and pass to Tina.
Thanks, Heather. I love this story. And like you were describing, it reminds me of uh, spiritual law. I don't get what I say I want, I get what I am. And it's like the law of gravity. If I walk off my roof, I'm going to splat on the ground. It's not personal, it's just a law. So if I go around looking for bad, I'm going to find bad. And if I start looking for good, I am more likely to find good. So, and I just love the way this story explains that um, perfectly. And I think I'm going to go ahead and keep reading unless you have more comments on that section. Did you end with, do I need to start with to realize God is love?
Yes.
Okay. To realize God as love is the remedy for fear and the only real one. Of late, a great many books have been published on the subject of fear, but on examining them, I find that in nearly all cases, they only get as far as analyzing fear, saying what a bad thing it is and how much harm it does and how important it is for us to get rid of it without offering any practical way of doing so. The truth is that there is only one remedy for fear, and that is to get some sense of divine love by thinking about it, analyzing it, claiming it, and expressing it in practice toward all human beings without any exception. And I think I'll pause there. I think I'll go ahead and comment real quick on this. So, what this says to me is something that I really was so relieved to hear when I was at my bottom and I had my first conversation with my sponsor, um, that we are people who want to quit and can't. The 12-step program is for people who want to quit drinking and can't, who want to quit being codependent and can't. And what this is saying to me is, um, that we've got to turn to this, um, we've got to turn to love, but but we are people who want to quit living in fear and and can't. But what we've found is that we can take action. And this might be different than maybe somebody who doesn't have a spiritual malady. But for those of us with a spiritual malady, the 12 steps were written by people who wanted to quit drinking, and they tried really, really, really hard to quit drinking. And that didn't matter. They could not quit drinking. And the harder they tried to quit drinking, the more they drank. And for those of us with codependency, the harder we tried to quit codependency, the more codependent we became. If you've got a spiritual problem that needs a spiritual solution. So, what we've learned instead is that we have to work the 12 steps, work them fast, get to step 12, and start carrying this message of hope to others who suffer the way we suffer. Codependents help codependents, alcoholics help alcoholics, so on. So, in that 12th step, where it says, what is step 12? We tried to carry this message to others and practice these principles in all of our affairs. So that's really where the rubber meets the road in recovery, where we start taking this out and helping others. And it is love in action. And that's what they found that they absolutely had to have. It wasn't good enough to try to sit on a cushion and feel love or think of love, or we had to put it into action. And then it came to us when we started giving it away in this 12th step. And I pass.
Thanks, Tina. Um, yeah, what comes up for me is around the idea that the truth is that there is only one remedy for fear, and that it is to get some sense of divine love. And I did not really have a concept around what that meant, of divine love when I came into the program. I had a lot of fear. I had fear. I had fear around driving. I had fear around social situations. How was it going to go? Who would I talk to? What would they think? All of that self-obsession, self-consciousness, um, was fear of being judged and condemned and so on. And so when I worked my fourth and fifth step and understood kind of where that fear came from, and then worked 6 and 7 and asked God to remove that shortcoming, then I did start to get some sense of divine love. So instead of bringing fear to a situation, I would talk to my higher power. So they say here, thinking about it, analyzing it, claiming it, and expressing it in practice toward all human beings. I would simply pray and just ask, what would love have me do? What can I contribute? And so when I take that action and ask for guidance from higher power, then again, it's that expansion that we talked about around God is life. It's opening up, it's being open-hearted to any kind of possibility. And I can come into a situation with just the open heartedness of giving, of contributing, of love into any situation, and my fear is gone. And I think my loss of fear was one of the first things I noted after I worked the steps, was that my constant stomach roiling, butterflies, anxiety, that was probably the first thing that kind of slipped away, because instead of feeling like I had to have my walls and defenses up for protection, I could put them down and be open hearted and loving in situations where I would be petrified before. And I will pass. Do you want me to read on?
Actually, I've got a comment that came up while you were commenting. Um,
Awesome.
s- so yeah, I have a similar experience when I started working the 12 steps, and specifically step 12, carrying this message of hope to others. My self-obsession and my anxiety started to go away, but it took longer for to get this kind of a connection to divine love. And what I think cultivated that in my life is that I now do a morning meditation, and I start with thank you for my wonderful life, and I write down a few things that I'm grateful for. And then the next thing that I do is I go to page 87 in the big book, and I start with that. On awakening, let us think about the 24 hours ahead. And I look at my schedule for the day and see what's coming up. And then it says, in thinking about our day, we may face indecision. We may not be able to determine which course to take. Here we ask God for inspiration and intuitive thought or decision. We relax and take it easy, but don't struggle. So that completely began changing my life. I mean, this idea that we think about this one day, that I don't think I'd ever done that really since, I don't know, teenage years. I don't think I was always in the past, in the future, trying to make, in other people's heads. That was like startling to me, this whole idea that I was going to stay in this 24-hour period. Um, and and I was also going to note, and I do this in my written meditation, the things that, first of all, I ask, for guidance, and then I I jot down the things that I don't quite know how to handle in this 24-hour period. And then I completely trust that when the time is right, I'm going to get guidance on that. I trust it so much that I completely let it go. I'm not even keeping a mental checklist of all of the things I've given to my higher power, because I trust that if and when the time is right, I'm going to get an intuitive thought. And that has completely changed my life. That practice is where I've now started to get really connected to my source, um, around what my life should be about each 24 hours, what I should expend my energy, my thought, my time, my efforts toward. Um, and it's just a really wonderful way to live. And I would have told you 15 years ago, that the idea of living an anxiety free life was an impossibility. But that is, in fact, my reality today, is that I don't spend any time in anxiety. If I have something I'm not sure what to do, I write it down and I just give it to my higher power. And I just focus on the things I do know how to do this 24 hours. And I don't go back to those other things ever unless they're intuitively brought to me. It has been, well, the book says that going to get, we're going to get to live a happy, joyous, and free life. And I'm experiencing those promises. I thought those promises were for other people. I thought, yeah, right. In a pig's eye. But I just kept taking the actions, and that's what has manifested. At the very end of my prayer in the morning is, please show me what I can do for those who still suffer. And that's kind of my mandate for every day. And I pass.
All right, we will move on. If your prayers are not answered, there must be something wrong. The universe is governed by law, and there is no such thing as a broken law. Jesus himself did not break the law of being when he performed his miracles. He could not, and he would not have wished to. He fulfilled the law when he prayed. When your prayers are not answered, it must be because you have not fulfilled the condition of the law. And 99 times in 100, it is because you are lacking in a sense of love for all. It is a cosmic law that love heals and that love and fear and condemnation damage and destroy. Treat yourself for love each day and watch your thoughts and watch your tongue and watch your deeds, that nothing contrary to love finds expression here. And so, yeah, if your prayers are not being answered, there must be something wrong because you have not fulfilled the conditions of the law. And I think when we are, and this used to be me before program, was that I always prayed for myself. Like, God, can you get so and so to do this? God, get me out of this pickle. God, and God usually was the last resort. I only prayed after I'd tried every human solution, tried to think my way out of the problem, tried to act my way out of the problem, and nothing worked. And then I would go to God. And shocking, a lot of my prayers were not answered. And so now when I am in confusion and, kind of like Tina was talking about with her meditation and prayer, I go to God first. So this is what I'm confused about. Um, I'm going to give it to you to figure it out. And I'm going to go on from there. I'm going to let intuition, inspiration, whatever come when it comes. And a lot of I, as a codependent, want answers like right now. That is not God's way. So I have to learn patience for God's work to happen or for God to, work through me or work through someone else. Um, I think that's a part of this law as well. And then watch your thoughts and watch your tongue in italics, probably because it's watch what you say and watch your deeds. And we hear a lot. Our thoughts become our words and our words become our actions. And so if we're not in that place of love in our thinking, if we're in a place of selfishness and self-centeredness, then that's going to come out in our speech and in our actions. And so if we want to be divine love and be the epitome of divine love, to channel higher powers divine love, then we have to start with our thoughts. And I will pass to Tina.
Thanks, Heather. So, this statement, if your prayers are not being answered, there must be something wrong. Well, I don't even really keep track of my prayers. It's kind of like that idea of a God box where there's a slot to put something in, but there's no place to get it out. So once they go in, I'm done with them. Once I've prayed them, they're not even mine anymore. I don't even keep track of them. I just be about this 24 hours and remember that, my final prayer of the morning is show me what I can do for those who still suffer. It's like right now, today, help me to be helpful and useful. I know you've got the rest of it. And there might be things that I had on that bullet list of things I'm not quite sure how to handle that are none of my business. And I'm willing to trust that the things that are my business are going to keep coming up for me. And the things that are none of my business are often just going to fall away. That's okay. I don't have to keep track. Um, so this treat yourself for love every day and watch your thoughts and watch your tongue and watch your deeds, that nothing contrary to love finds expression there. When I go to bed at night, I do this practice of envisioning the people of in my life and envision them surrounded by love and light. And I'm not really good with envisioning people. I don't really, there are a lot of people who are good visual thinkers. I am not. I'm more of a feeling thinker. I think in feelings, I don't think in actual pictures, but I can, and it's really helpful for me to envision or think of the people that I'm miffed at first. That's where I need to start. That such and such a person is surrounded by your love and light, and such a person is surrounded by your love and light, and such is such a person. So I start with the people that I'm a little bit miffed at, and or I start on one side of the I start in Europe and then I come to the US, to East Coast, and then I work across the country. And I just start praying for people. And that's how I end my day. And I usually fall asleep before I'm halfway through the US. So, but that's my, um, but it is very important for me to remember that everyone's a child of God, you know, that even the people that I'm miffed at are children of God. And they're in God's love and protection, and that I want them to be in God's love and protection. And I pass. Is it your turn to read or my turn to read? Mine? Okay. Do I start with scientific prayer? Okay. Okay. Scientific prayer consists of seeing God where the trouble seems to be. When a person seems to be behaving badly, see the presence of God in him. When a part of the body is sick or damaged, see the presence of God there. Where there seems to be lack, see the presence of God and claim divine love too. And when you feel the sense of divine love, your demonstration is made, and what you need will come. You do not need to have a thrilling experience that might be only psychic. A strong conviction of the truth with a sense of divine love is what will demonstrate under all circumstances. You have a strong conviction that two and two make four, that Chicago is in Illinois, that the Statue of Liberty is in New York. You do not argue about these things. You just know them to be true. Have the same quiet, firm conviction about your statements of truth, and you will demonstrate. Sometimes you get a beautiful sense of peace concerning the problem. The dove alights, but this does not have to happen in order to make your demonstration. As a rule, you will get it without that. If the dove alights, stop working. So, my thoughts about this is that yeah, what I pretty much already described what I was going to say about this. I just envision people surrounded by love and light, even when people seem to be behaving badly. Um, and I just trust that God's got it. Um, and really love, you do not argue about these things, you just know them to be true. So, my job is to be the person that my higher power would have me be. My job is not and as a codependent, I'm kind of probably too aware of when I am behaving in ways that people don't like. But my job isn't to make people like the ways that I'm behaving. My job is to make sure that they're lined up with higher power, period. End of story. And to let people have whatever feelings that they're going to have about that. It isn't my job to change that or to convince or to cajole or to get liked or to get approved or to manage my image or any of those things. My job is simply to be and do what my higher power would have me be and do each 24 hours. And so and I like how it says sometimes you get a beautiful sense of peace concerning the problem, but this does not have to happen in order to make your demonstration. As a rule, you will get it without that. If the dove alights, stop working. So I keep praying if it's still on my mind. You know what I mean? When I go to bed, if it's still with me, I keep praying. If it's gone, I let it be gone. That's, I don't pull it back up. I don't drag it back up. Um, and I'll pass.
Thanks, Tina. Yeah, I think, this is such a great saying. God is where the trouble seems to be. So it could be when someone's behaving badly, whether they're sick, or there seems to be a lack. If we get into a situation like that, the instruction here is, see the presence of God and claim divine love. That's all we have to do. It's very simple, and that can be in prayer. However, that you want to acknowledge that presence of God and the divine love. And then we let it go. So I think, a lot of times we have, again, the perception that, some things are bad, some things are good. We can also be codependent about it. We can say, oh, somebody's mad at me, that's bad. But if we can just take that one step back and say, okay, God is in this. I don't know how God is in this. I don't know what's going to happen, how it's going to go, but God is at work here. And so I can release. I don't have to hang on to this tightly. I don't have to fix it. I don't have to do anything but just acknowledge that in this situation or this with this person, God is in this. And just send out that divine love that they were talking about previously. And so what comes with that, you will get a sense of peace. That's all we get. And we can this is, I think, the total surrender and acceptance that there is a higher power, that I am not the higher power, and that something much larger, much more powerful, much more, I don't know, loving, is out there and is at work. And it's not for me to do the work here. It tells me stop working if the dove alights. And so I can let it go and surrender it to higher power. And I will move on to the next paragraph unless you have another comment. Okay. Do not talk about your prayers. Keep your spiritual business to yourself. Do not tell people that you are praying for such and such a thing or in such and such a way. Keep the affairs of your soul secret. When you get a demonstration, do not run around and tell everyone about it immediately. Keep it to yourself until it has had time to crystallize, so to speak. When Jesus healed people, he said, "Go away and tell no one." And I think what comes up for me around this is, again, where it kind of told us about prayer. I don't want to be selfish in my praying. I want my prayers to be for the good of everyone. Um, and also the idea around The traditions and step 12, attraction rather than promotion is kind of what comes up for me when it says, if you get when you get a demonstration, do not run around and tell everyone about it immediately. Keep it to yourself until it has had time to crystallize. So yeah, like I think our actions um, around certain situations or whatever can be an impetus and an evidence of God at work in our lives. And we don't have to go around and say, oh, I prayed for this and God did this. We just live in that quiet faith, and that becomes the evidence itself. And I'll pass.
Thank you, Heather. I think I'm just going to go on and read. I don't really have anything to add. Because God is love, God never punishes or threatens anyone. The action of God takes place only to heal and comfort and inspire. The nearer we get to God, the happier, more peaceful, and healthier we are. In fact, trouble and sickness are really the way in which we become aware that we have lost the sense of his presence. When we make mistakes or do wrong, the punishment which we bring upon ourselves is the natural consequence of the law we have broken, and we shall continue to suffer until we cease to break the law. This is a wise arrangement and a very merciful one, for in no other way could we learn. A red-hot stove burns your hand if you touch it. This is a good thing, because if it did not, you would someday inadvertently put your hand in the fire and it would be burned off before you knew about it. God is love, and God is the only power. And yep, that's my experience. That when I move away from love, it hurts. I suffer. When I move toward love, i.e., God, it's great and it feels great. And it's really a wonderful model for parenting, right? Is that we allow people that we love to make their choices and suffer the consequences or benefits from the choices that they've made. That's a loving relationship with people. To not try to convince, cajole, coerce, and our higher power or God or love certainly does not do those things with us. It's a great model. And I pass.
Yeah. God never punishes or threatens anyone. And I think, again, it comes back to, the idea that God is love. So God is not the judgmental father figure who is, looking at our behavior and so on. God is, there to heal, comfort, and inspire. And so, first of all, I think if we change that kind of concept in our head that we may have of God as an authoritarian and realize that God is love, then we can become nearer, and it tells us more happier, more peaceful, and healthier that we are. But if we choose, you know, that we make mistakes or do wrong, then, like Tina said, the result is that we're going to feel terrible about it. And that's the clue. That's like there is a hint here. And what it requires is that we turn and take action and seek out our higher power. because our higher power is merciful, but we have to take the action of turning and doing different. Not, if we're in self-consciousness, anger, selfishness, whatever, we have to turn to higher power in order to connect again around that love, that divine love, that we get to experience when we are connected to our higher power. And I will pass.
Thank you, Heather. Thank you so much for joining me today. This is the fourth episode of Steinway Hall, Emmet Fox and the 12 Steps. And our next podcast will be going over the next several aspects of God in the Seven Main Aspects of God booklet. Thanks again, Heather, for joining me today, and thank you all for joining us.
Thanks,
Do you have
Tina.
anything to add?
No, I really enjoyed it. And I think, looking at these Emmet Fox's pamphlets is really worthwhile to check them out. Yeah.
I agree. All right. Goodbye, everybody.